My guest Donald Woods and I would like to welcome you to another game in our series featuring the best chess the world has ever seen. The series has already taken us round the world, and tonight we'll be featuring the third game in my choice of 12, which was played in England. It comes from Hastings in 1922, a regular venue for top-class chess right up to the present day. The game is considered by many experts to be the most brilliant ever played. It came as one of the first mighty clashes between two Russian grandmasters, who in the later 1920s and early 1930s were to contend at two series of world title matches against each other. Playing white was Bogoljubov, who was to become the only man ever to hold the German and Soviet championships at the same time. Bogoljubov defected from the USSR in 1926 and was declared a traitor, his name only being rehabilitated in 1977, 25 years after his death. Bogoljubov was a portly figure, an eternal optimist and a child of nature, possessed of a river of flowing ideas when in action on the chessboard. His poetic skills in that medium were not matched by his appearance. At one tournament, the official photographer cut Bogoljubov, in fact the senior grandmaster present, out of the picture, since he thought that a rotund gentleman brandishing a glass of beer had no place in the record of chess masters. His opponent and the greater player was Alexander Alekhine, born in Moscow in 1892, of a family that was both wealthy and aristocratic. The story of his life is a mixture of powerful artistry and tragically misdirected genius, producing one of the most turbulent careers in the history of chess. Alekhine was playing in Mannheim at the outbreak of war in 1914, when he was interned by the Germans. His release doubtless obtained by family influence. In 1915, he joined the Russian Red Cross and served as a magistrate and chess player, winning the first Soviet championship in 1920. He joined the Communist Party in 1921 and worked as an official interpreter, but later settled in France as a naturalized citizen. At Hastings in 1922, Alekhine was at the start of a stunningly successful European tour, scoring a string of tournament victories, including here at San Remo in Italy. But of course his ultimate goal was to take the world title from Capablanca. In 1927, the Cuban accepted Aлекhine's challenge and unexpectedly conceded the title after a mammoth struggle in Buenos Aires. Although Alekhine now dominated the chess world like a colossus, discerning critics noticed disturbing signs of impatience in his games. Not content with the inevitable incidents of drawn games when one is facing strong opposition, Alekhine began to force events at every turn, running hideous risks in his desperate efforts to crush every opponent. By 1935, Alekhine's impatience had become compounded by a new reliance on the stimulation offered by alcohol. More or less in a perpetual stupor, he lost his title in 1935 to the Dutchman Max Euwe. The pre-match contract had stipulated that Alekhine had the right to a return bout. Alarmed by his loss, Alekhine suppressed his desire for drink and regained the title from Euwe in 1937, thus becoming the first man to win the World Championship twice. He retained the title until his death, the only man ever to die while in possession of the world title. In 1941, he fell under Nazi influence and published 3 articles directed against Jewish players. Alekhine was, of course, still world champion, the opportunity for matches having been severely limited by the constraints of World War. And a new young challenger, Mikhail Botvinnik, was eager for a match to take place. This was arranged in March 1946 under the auspices of the British Chess Federation. But the day after the news was dispatched by telegram, Alekhine died of a heart attack. Alekhine would undoubtedly have lost against Botvinnik, but we can now go back to see him at the height of his powers in this game from 1922. The tournament position meant that Alekhine had to win with black, and, as he often did, he resorted to the risky Dutch defence. So Bogoljubov was white, he played d4, a move we've become used to over the past few weeks, and Alekhine responded with f5, announcing the Dutch defence. Well, Donald, in our first game, several weeks ago, you expressed doubts about the king's gambit when white moved the f-pawn on the second move. How do you feel about the Dutch defence? Is this a defence you're comfortable with?
The same way. I think it's safe to say that the average club player would tend to avoid it like the plague. And to me, it looks so ugly, you know. On aesthetic grounds, it just looks ugly to me.
Yes,
it's horribly exposed, sort of.
Yes, what Aлекhine's doing, of course, is he's taking risks. Yeah. He's weakening his own position, especially on the f-file, but he's also staking out a claim in the centre and announcing as well he's going to attack on the king's side. And it's interesting, one of the things that we're trying to do is to show the march of chess ideas, the progress of techniques. And we've seen a couple of games where black responded to the d4 with the queen's gambit. He just put the pawn in the centre and defended. And by the 1920s, people realised that when you were black in situations like this, against a strong opponent like Bogoljubov, your chances of winning were remote. And they ditched the classical approach, which is to meet every step with a counter step and hold firm in the centre, in favour of asymmetrical defences. They stopped trying to hold the lines. They went for a pure counterattack. And that's what Aлекhine's doing here. This is, again, an advance.
But even some of the asymmetrical defences seem to have more balance to me. I mean, they look okay, whereas this one is, it's like someone going out of their way to do the opposite.
That's right, the game continues like this. And yes, some nowadays, perhaps in order to achieve an unbalance, one would choose the King's Indian defence, but the Dutch in those days was the equivalent of this sort of unbalancing operation. So the game continues, and Bogoljubov's developing his king's bishop in fianchetto, and out comes the black knight, and the bishop takes the long diagonal, and Alekhine gives a check. And it was Alechine's view that the king's bishop in the Dutch defence was a kind of superfluous piece. It didn't mean he wanted to sacrifice it or get rid of it. He wanted to trade it off to get more space for operation on the king's side. And Bogoljubov parried the check, of course, and Alekhine has now achieved what he wanted. He's got rid of that bishop. And now Bogoljubov should really recapture with the queen. This is the best move, it's the most active. But he didn't do that. He took that with the knight. It's a plausible move, but the knight's better placed on c3 than d2. And it's remarkable now to see how Alekhine really exploits this very slight inaccuracy, already after 6 moves or so, to start to get the lead with black. Out comes the knight, attacking the white pawn on d4. Bogoljubov defends the pawn, of course. And Alekhine castles. Bogoljubov also castles his king into safety. And Alekhine prepares to bring his queen's bishop out. And Bogoljubov plants his queen on this aggressive square. And you were saying in an earlier game, Donald, that sometimes these little safety king moves are what distinguish the grandmaster from the enthusiast.
Yes, often to an ordinary player it seems an unaccountable thing, but yeah, we see one, I suppose.
That's right. The black king sidesteps.
Except that one's not too unaccountable to me in view of the last queen move.
That's right. So the queen is eyeing the black king on that diagonal, and Alekhine moves it out of the way, which is a preparation for advancing in the centre. And now Bogoljubov puts his queen here. And his idea was to stop black's next move. Unfortunately, it doesn't. And Alekhine makes a big step in the centre. And it looks as if white could capture the pawn on e5 several times. But the problem is that at the end of that, the white knight on d2 will be hanging to the black queen. And so white really can't go in for this exchanging operation. And now Alechine's really scored his first moral and strategic victory. He's taken a tremendous amount of ground in the centre. And now if I were Bogoljubov, having recognised the failure of my opening strategy, I would probably play a move like this and kick the black knight. But Bogoljubov tried to maintain his central posts, and he played this move. And now we see a move that I think shows the breadth of Alechine's conception, and really a completely new strategic insight. We've seen games before where people were attacking vigorously against the king. We saw the Capablanca game, where Capablanca and Bernstein thrust the whole weight of the battle onto the queen's wing.
All indirect.
That's right. But now in this game, Alekhine now plays this move. And what Alekhine introduced into chess, apart from the concept of the asymmetrical defence, playing to win with black, was the idea of playing on both wings at once. He had a tremendous breadth of conception, a tremendous strategic grasp. And you see he's already attacking in the centre. He's thinking of attacking on the king side as well, with this move f5 in the opening.
Now the right flank. Yes.
Now he attacks on the queen side too. He's aggressive in all sectors. And Bogoljubov played this, which is a little safety move. And Alekhine now starts on the other side, preparing to swing his queen across. And Bogoljubov defends the b4 square. He doesn't want a black knight coming in here. And out comes the queen, menacing the white king side. And you can see now exactly what I was saying before, that the black queen is operating on the king's flank, the black pawn, rook and knight are operating on the other side of the board, and the black pawns are taking control of the centre. And there are now nasty threats, moves like this, for example, followed by something like this, driving away the white knight and playing for mate on the h2 square. So Bogoljubov felt that he had to take a radical defensive measure against this. And he played this move. Well, that sure stops the threats.
It's pretty dicey too for that first chance, isn't it?
Yeah, but it stops the threats. But after Aлекhine's reply, knight to g4, this knight, as you can see, Donald, takes up a tremendously strong post.
Yes.
And it can't be chased away. It's there forever. It's a permanent knight. It's very difficult to get rid of it. The only way to get rid of it is, in fact, what Bogoljubov does. But
those knights anchored by a pawn can be a nightmare, can't they?
That's right. And what Bogoljubov does is to play his own knight out to g5, where, of course, it isn't stable because black can always chase it away with h6.
Yes.
And Alekhine at last developed his bishop. And now, as I said before, there's only one way of getting rid of the knight, and that's the way to do it, by playing f3. The knight has to go away. But the problem now, of course, is that white's whole pawn front around his king has become weakened, it's become undermined. Those three pawns on e3, f3 and g3 are really a source of future weakness. It's not something you really want to have happen. And it's interesting now to see how Alekhine advances against these pawns and exploits them, while still maintaining his options on the other wing. And now, one of the threats in the position, at some point, is to blast open the whole structure by doing this. And Bogoljubov really now had a change of heart. Instead of defending the g4 square, he felt he had to defend against the f4 threat. So he played that himself. And now he's trying to block the situation. I think he was really hoping for a draw at this point. And Alekhine, of course, sealed the centre in order to lock the white bishop on g2 out of the game. Bogoljubov put his rook here. He's already a very defensive situation. He's making space for the knight to come across to the king side and defend. And Alekhine, as one would expect, sooner or later, kicked the knight. And white had to go back. So we've seen Alekhine attacking on the king's side, we've seen him attacking on the queen's side, and now, further evidence of his breadth of vision, he strikes out in the centre as well. d5, a very powerful move. And white can't really take that off. If he takes, the black knight takes back, and of course black is in total command of the whole situation. The queen is attacked, the white pawn on e3 is attacked. It's a disaster. And this is completely out of the question. He played this, knight f1. And Alekhine reinforced his d5 pawn. And one of the ideas behind this is that black, again, might be thinking of playing a move like b5 to attack on the queen side. So Bogoljubov played this to stop it. But then, flexibility again, Alekhine came straight back, because the knight can go to b4 now and invade the white position. So now white's really under siege, and he really has just to try and hang on. He played rook d2, and the knight came in to b4. Bogoljubov retreated his bishop, making some more space on the king's side. And now Alekhine switched the attack again. The queen came back to e8. And this is the start of a remarkable whole change of front, attacking against the white queen side. Bogoljubov came here. It's a rather strange-looking move, but he's rather short of ideas at the moment. Perhaps he was thinking of ultimately playing for the advance g3 to g4 himself. But now Alekhine strikes. He takes here. And Bogoljubov could take back with the queen. Queen takes c4. But again, position like this, white's completely paralysed. And what he preferred to do, which I think most grandmasters would do, he took back with the pawn. And after Alekhine took this off, although black's won a pawn, white has to a certain extent freed his position. And the rook on a1 now has some latitude. He brought the knight back. Alekhine retreated the bishop. The other knight came across. And Alekhine continued his attack on this side, trying to make use of his extra pawn. And Bogoljubov now rushing all his pieces over to defence.
He's teasing him from side to side.
That's right. And now Alekhine started a remarkable combination, which makes this game worthy of inclusion in our greatest games ever. He played this. Knight to d3. A good positional move. It sinks the knight into white's vitals. But it gives back the pawn. And Bogoljubov, not unnaturally, took it off. Rook takes pawn. And now Alekhine played this. And we see that the white queen is attacked, and the white rook is attacked. But no problem. Bogoljubov simply played rook takes rook. And doubtless he was expecting Alekhine to take back. He was expecting this move. Queen takes rook. I mean, this is the move you'd have played with.
Yes, certainly, without any hesitation.
Yeah, I think I would have played it too. I think almost any grandmaster would have played it. But now Alekhine comes up with this incredible surprise, and this is what happens now. Is enshrines this game as one of the all-time greats. Alekhine, in successive moves, leaves a rook, a queen, and his other rook to be taken with check. The white rook simply sails into the black position and takes off all three of black's major pieces, ending up with a check. Alekhine more or less ignores it and gets on with his own part of the game. He takes this. He takes the queen instead. Bogoljubov takes the black queen. And now, again, you might expect black to recapture. But no, he pushes on this pawn. Pawn to c2. And Bogoljubov helps himself to another rook with check. This rook has eaten the entire black army. And up comes the king.
But he's fiddling while Rome burns, isn't he?
Yes, but now let's take stock of the position. White has taken almost every black piece. He's 2 rooks up. Both sides have 2 knights and the bishop, and white's got 2 extra rooks. The whole black position has been devoured and eaten by this rampant white rook. But now the little pawn on c2 can't be stopped from queening.
Absolutely unstoppable.
Yes. The marshal's baton. Yes. Every infantryman has the marshal's baton in his knapsack. So what can Bogoljubov do? He moves the knight. There's nothing else he can do. And this pawn comes on and becomes a queen. Check. And the white pieces huddle back. Now, this is, again, one of the most extraordinary positions ever seen, especially after Alekhine's next move. He plays this, hitting the white rook, which has to go into the corner. Now, look at this incredible huddle of white pieces. And look at this bunch of white pieces here. Now, in fact, material is technically equal, but because of the activity of black's forces and the fact that white's pieces are in such a absolutely hopeless mess around the king's side, black can now win fairly easily. And Alekhine handles the technical part of this game to absolute perfection. He takes on c4. White tries to bring his rook back into the game. But now out comes the bishop. Bishop to b5. And the threat is against the knight on f1. There's really only one way to stop that.
Rook has to capture.
Rook has to capture, of course. Rook takes b5. Queen takes b5. And now, for the first time in the game, black not only has some attack, he also has a material superiority. He has queen against rook and bishop. And this is, in almost all circumstances, enough to win. Bogoljubov continued to thrash defensively, g4, trying to get some counterplay. And if black should take on g4, the pawn on e4 is becoming weak. But Alekhine having none of that. Check to the white king. And of course this must be taken. Bishop takes knight.
It's cruel stuff, right?
And he takes back. And Bogoljubov takes the pawn off. But now in comes the black queen. And white's now really very short of moves. He's almost completely paralysed. He plays this. And Alekhine just waits with his king.
Yawns.
That's right. And now he plays this. And Alekhine waits again. And now at long last, Bogoljubov has to start giving something away. He plays this. There's no other move really anymore. And Alekhine takes it off. Black takes pawn. He takes back. And the queen takes. And d6. Again, white's got no other moves left. He has to start jettisoning material and hoping that he can create some sort of fortress.
A gentleman would resign.
A gentleman would have resigned by now, yes. But Bogoljubov, as we know, was a portly, rotund, beer-brandishing figure who didn't like resigning. And he has to give away something else, which, of course, is also taken. And at last, white has some freedom for his rook. But this is thwarted by this remarkable move, offering the queen again. Another queen.
One of those unstoppable pawns.
That's
again.
right.
Yes.
So he has to take it off. Rook takes queen. Pawn takes back. A remarkable parallel to the previous operation. And of course, he has to stop e1 equals queen. So the king comes up. He takes it off. And of course, he has to take back. But now the pawn ending is a complete and easy win for black. He just walks the king over. King comes to f2. King goes to f7.
There's something sulky about Bogoljubov's last moves.
King e3. King e6. King up to e4. And black played d5 check. And here Bogoljubov finally resigned. Of course, in order to stop the black d pawn from queening, he loses both of his pawns on the f and h file.
It's an irony, right? Because Bogoljubov is the one who fancied himself. And he's the one who said, when I have white, I win because I have white. When I have black, I win because I am Bogoljubov.
Yes, that's right.
But yeah, he has white and he loses.
Yes, and he loses in such a comprehensive fashion. I mean, the amazing thing about this game is the way that Alekhine is so alert that he's looking for chances here, there, everywhere. He can jump in, and if there's a slight weakness on the king side, he attacks that, and then while Bogoljubov is defending against that, a weakness appears on the queen side, so he switches round there.
Remarkable conception.
And this pawn march, and also this queen sacrifice at the end.
And then the repeat of the unstoppable pawn.
Yes, it's such a mirror image game. And Alekhine said that this was perhaps the most brilliant game he ever played. But ironically, there was no prize for the most brilliant game in that tournament. Well, Donald, thanks again. Thanks very much for your comments. So, another stunning example of the power of attack and counterattack built on imaginative defense when playing black. In our last 3 programs now, we've seen black win. And next week we move forward just a year to 1923 to see a real master, Aaron Nimzowitsch, who built a worldwide reputation for decisive, match-winning defensive play. He proved once and for all that defensive doesn't have to be negative. Do join Donald and me for the next Duel of the Mind. For now, good night.